Ichimon Japan is made possible in part by Patreon support. So I would like to thank our two newest patrons, Michael Shoki, hope I got that last name right, Michael, and Aspire1. Thank you so much for signing up for the $3 a month plus alpha tier. That gets you access to Japanese plus alpha. And there is a new episode of Japanese plus alpha. By the way, that's my podcast about the Japanese language. The latest episode is all about the word fuiki. Fuiki. It's a very interesting word with a little quirk in its pronunciation. So if you want to go find out about that, then head on over to japankyo.com/Patreon, sign up for the plus alpha tier. And by the way, $1 a month will get you access to like bonus content and early access to the podcast episodes and versions of the show without this long intro thing. All right. So again, japankyo.com/Patreon. Thank you to Michael. Thank you to Aspire1. And let's get to the show. Again, you would never guess that this kanji is being used to refer to the English pronunciation of, the Japanese version of the English version of whatever the original Latin of Caesar was.
The Japanese version of the English version of the Latin name.
Welcome to Ichimon Japan. I'm Tony and
I'm Tough Spokesperson.
So that was the default audio name in our recording software for some reason. Tough Spokesperson. It's a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and we are once again joined by...
Hello, it's Miyuki.
Another maybe tough spokesperson. I don't know. We'll find out. So,
all right.
So, Ichimon means one question, and every episode we ask a question about Japan. And today, our question is, what is a kirakira name? So, this is a continuation, in a way, of the previous episode in which we talk about how Japanese names work. You don't necessarily have to listen to that one to, get this one, but that will give you some extra context that I think, could be useful. So you can go check that one out, the one right before this one. But who wants to explain what a kirakira name is? Miyuki, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, so maybe we should explain what kirakira actually means.
Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, so kirakira is a onomatopoeia for something that's sparkly or shiny.
Yeah,
so it's a sparkly name, like Tough Spokesperson.
Yeah, like
it's a sparkly name. Yeah.
So yeah, like
kirakira boshi, right? Like kirakira boshi,
right.
twinkle twinkle,
twinkle little star is kirakira hikaru. Yeah. So the kirakira name. So sparkly names.
Yeah, literally it's sparkly name.
Yeah.
Or like if you want to get a little looser with the translation, might be something like a flashy kind of very, very creative name. I think the kirakira comes from like that kind of flashy, kind of trying to almost show off in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
I guess
it's these like very, very creative names with like, I guess the most typical examples are like you have kanji, but you don't use like the normal reading. You use some very unique or original reading of the kanji that somebody would normally never be able to guess, right?
Or from a completely different language.
Or from a completely different language, yes. Often like English words. So yeah. And then there's other, like sometimes they do kind of follow the reading of the kanji, but they're just very, very like uncommon. Normally, you would not see that used as a name. So we can give a few examples. Maybe we should start with a list of the examples, like those, top 5 or whatever, just to give people a general idea of what we're talking about. And then we'll go back and talk a little bit about the history to give some context for, to better understand this. So, Yuki, could you, let's go maybe from number 5. I found a list of what the most difficult to read kirakira name are, and we can kind of explain each one, and that should give a better idea of what we're talking about.
I think number 5 is my favorite on the list too.
Oh, number 5 is okay.
Really?
What was number 5 again? I forgot.
Okay, I'll only do number 5. Number 5 is
Yeah.
poo.
Poo. So we're talking about first names, and we're talking about poo as in, what is the kanji here that we're talking about?
Yellow and bear. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, yellow and bear. All right. So as in Winnie the Pooh, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we're talking about Pooh. All right. So you would never, if you didn't know that this is how the parents want it to be read, you would never guess that yellow and bear would be read Pooh for this supposed person. I've never met a Mr. Pooh, but apparently, or maybe, would you say that's a boy name? I guess that's a boy name, huh?
It's a boy bear.
I don't know. I guess so.
Yeah, I guess it's a
bear
boy
name.
bear, but
Well, I mean, I actually kind of like this one because it continues the... So in Japanese, people don't know his name is actually Winnie. They think his name is Pooh.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So this
generally
kind of continues
true.
that. Yeah, Pooh is supposed to be the type of bear he is, but his name is Winnie. But in Japanese, he's
That is
just Pooh-san.
true.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with Japanese people. Yeah. They just know him as Pooh-san.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Weenie-san.
Winnie-san.
I never thought about that, but that's true.
Yeah.
Huh.
So this is just perpetuating that mistake. Oh, Pooh-san.
Poor
So
boy.
you named your kid after a character incorrectly.
Yeah. It's like
Oh,
calling,
my God.
it's like, I love Donald Duck, so I'm going to call my son Duck-san.
Right. Yeah, kind of like that.
Or Mouse-san for Mickey.
Mouse son. Oh my
Anyway,
gosh.
so, I mean, it does kind of sound cute. I mean, I will say that. So, that's, hey,
But
hope better.
think about it when he just, becomes 50 or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And we were
By
going to
then,
talk
there will
more
be
about
so many
that,
kids
but,
named Pooh, it'll be normal.
Well, it's possible.
But think about it. Hello, I am direct manager here. My name is Pooh Yamada.
I love that.
Nice to meet you. Kind of introduction.
That voice makes it
think
even
about
better.
it.
Yeah, I love that voice.
What? Now just think about it.
Okay, Miyuki, that you have to do the rest of the podcast in that voice.
No. No way.
I'm Miyuki, and I'm going to do. Okay.
All right, let's move on. Yep.
Yeah. Number four.
So
Miyuki.
number 4 is tiara.
Tiara. And you know what? Like Tiara, I've heard that name in English too. So maybe to an English speaker, that doesn't sound that weird or rare. But I mean, in Japanese, especially, I mean, the first time somebody ever heard of this name, that does sound like, oh, what? Like what? You know? What kanji is written? What kanji is used to write that?
So this just doesn't make no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But first, T is written love.
Mm-hmm.
And Ra is, the kanji itself is read Ra. So there's nothing wrong with the Ra part, but the first T part is written love. And this kanji just doesn't have that sound at all.
It should be like Aida
exactly.
or something, right?
Yeah, it could be Aida.
Yeah, could be Aida. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Aida can be cute, but
Yeah, I think I've
Tiara.
heard of that name. Yeah.
yeah. But Tiara,
What's the connection with love and tiara anyway?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because like Yellow Bear, that one makes sense. But
Well, that's
yeah.
true. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah. That's true.
this one is just like, I like these two kanji. I like the sound tiara. Stick them together.
I guess so. Yeah. I think that's just happened.
Yeah,
mean, well,
And
I
I
think
think that
Tiara-
happens a lot with these names. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but like Tiara, I really like the sound Tiara. That's so cute. It's like my little girl will be princess, so I will give her a name of Tiara. What about kanji? Oh, maybe this little girl needs a lot of love, so we just give her love.
Yeah.
And then Ra,
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
think of anything else, so just put Ra anyway. Kind of.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens a lot with these names. It's like reverse engineering. You start with like, the idea, and then you kind of go backwards and like, what kanji do I like? And then it's kind of like a mix of all the things you want. But like I said, you would never read it that way unless somebody told you this is how it's read in this one case. So
Yeah, it feels like they should have picked the kanji for crown or princess or something like that.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, that would make more sense thematically, but I don't know.
We're already ignoring pronunciation anyway, so why
exactly.
not?
Right, exactly.
All right. So number 3 then.
Number 3 is hero.
But so so
The funny thing,
in Japanese you might in Japanese you might get the name like Hiro as in like Hiroyuki or sometimes Hiro by itself or something Hiro. But that is just Hiro. This is like Hi-iro-o, right? As in like a superhero kind of hero.
Right.
So first, that's one unique aspect of this. But 2, you're putting this very you would never read this kanji that way, but you're using shujinko. Shujinko is usually like the word to describe like the main character of a movie or a character in a book or something like that.
Yeah,
like
it's
a fictional
protagonist.
book. Yeah, protagonist. There you go. That's a good word.
Yes.
So you're writing it protagonist, but you're reading it hero as in superhero. So so yeah, you would never read it that way unless the kid told you like, this is how you read my name. You got it wrong. So
Oh.
And are you going to trust like a 4-year-old who's like, "Boku wa hiro desu"?
it's like, well, I mean, yeah, a lot of kids say that. Okay.
Okay.
No, hero. Hontoni hiro.
I mean, poor boy. He will have to explain that. Like,
Yeah,
thousands
Or he
and
could just be
thousands
very
of
heroic, and then
times.
everyone will believe him.
I guess. I mean,
that would
it's
work.
aspirational.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway. All right. So what's the next one?
So next one is doremi.
Do-re-mi. Okay, so do-re-mi as in, do-re-mi, fa, sol, la, right? Like
Yep.
the musical scale.
Yep.
But, and you know what? I to me, just that name alone doesn't sound super, super like strange. Like it's cute, but the way that it's written, and again, this list is about like, the top 100 hard to read kirakira names. So this is just the top 5. But number 2, the way you write this is 7 sounds, right? The kanji for 7 and then the kanji for sound, as in like there's 7 sounds in the musical scale. And again, you would never read it this way. You would never know that you were supposed to read it do re mi. So, yeah.
Could
Very
be,
creative.
yeah. Could be like nao. Nao.
No, yeah.
Naoto. Could be.
Yeah.
But I guess that's a girl's name.
Yeah.
So-
Do re mi is, I guess, a girl's name. Yeah.
Sounds like, yeah.
I gotta say, how can you tell it's a girl's name? Like, I kind of also intuitively felt it was a girl's name, but I don't know why.
Maybe because it has the me in it.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Name sounds with me kind of sounds like a girl's name.
Yeah.
But well, yeah, very creative. Good job.
Yeah. So what's the number 1 hardest to read according to this survey?
Oh my gosh. You make me say this. Okay, so number 1 is Shiza.
Do it in your businessman voice.
The number 1 is Caesar.
I love it when you get number 1.
You guys really like it now.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't do it in the first place.
Okay, so she's as in like Caesar, like Julius Caesar or, Augustus Caesar. So just interesting here. Ryan, why is this quirky in that they're...
Well, because it's based on the English pronunciation of the word, which itself is wrong, but then it gets like katakana-ified to be like doubly different from the original Kaiser sounding word.
Yeah. So, and then the kanji used to write this is, what was it? It was emperor, right? It means emperor, but it's pronounced, normally would be pronounced what?
Kote.
Kote, right, yeah. So again, you would never guess that this kanji is being used to refer to the English pronunciation of, the Japanese version of the English version of whatever the original Latin of Caesar was.
The Japanese version of the English version of the Latin name.
Oh my goodness.
So, Yeah, so I think there's so many of these, and we are going to bring up a few more, but I think, like I said, generally the idea is that you have some very nice meaning kanji almost always. You look at the kanji and it has a very nice, especially in the case of girls, it might be very cute, very cool, like kind of meaning if you only look at the kanji, but then they're read usually in a very different or creative or completely original way. And so they can be very confusing for people, when they're the first time that they're seeing that name written. Mm-hmm. And so this phenomenon of kirakira name, in a way, I'm going to say that it's nothing new, and we'll get to that towards the end of this episode. But when it really began to take off in modern times was in the 90s, it seems. Although that term doesn't seem to have been created until the maybe early 2000s. It seems like it might have been a website that created it, but I couldn't get final confirmation on that. But in the 90s, you started to hear about more and more cases of parents naming their children very unorthodox names, sometimes, with very, very creative readings of the names, or just very uncommonly used names. And so as the years went on, then we got into the 2000s and we got the name Kirakira name. And, it's been in the media for the past, 15 years, 20 years especially. You hear about this on Japanese news and variety shows, and you often hear about cases of people changing their names because it was very, difficult to have that name and they had all kinds of troubles. Or you sometimes hear about, some other interesting, for example, we're going to talk about briefly about a court case and things like that because, these names are very creative and they can be a little controversial sometimes. Now, there's, I think, maybe the first time that this really blew up in the Japanese media. And again, this wasn't known as a kirakira name at the time. And this is slightly different, but I think related, was in 1993 in a very, very, very famous case. People still talk about this every once in a while. And it's the case of this baby that was almost named Akuma. Ryan, what does Akuma mean?
Basically demon.
Yeah, basically demon. I mean, the kanji is a bad demon, right?
Yeah. Yep. So not just a normal demon, a bad demon.
Yeah.
A bad one.
Yeah, so aku and then ma is demon, aku would be the kanji for bad.
Evil.
And so the story goes that in 1993, a dad in the city of Akishima in Tokyo goes to deliver the birth registration of his newly born son to the city office. And he has there written in kanji, Akuma, right? Like demon, devil, whatever you want to translate that as. And they, the clerk accepted the paperwork, but shortly thereafter, I think it was the Ministry of Justice, they said they couldn't accept that because the thing is, so you can use any kanji in the Joyo kanji, which are the 2000 something kanji that are taught by the end of high school in Japan. You can use any of those, and Akuma are both in that list. So in theory, it should be okay, but they rejected it because it would be possibly cause harm to the child or something like that. It would have negative consequences on the child. And so that ended up, the dad and maybe the mother too, although the mother doesn't really come up in the story that much, but they filed a complaint. They kind of did a lawsuit to the city. And then they ended up, they ended up getting permission on a technicality because everything is procedurally okay. But then the city ended up appealing. And then at one point, the dad changed the kanji, but it was still read Akuma. So then that was still rejected. And then finally, the dad ended up deciding to slightly change the reading so it wasn't Akuma. And then everybody dropped the court cases. And that was the end of that part of the story. So apparently the final version from what I was able to find in an article seems to be Aku. So he changed the kanji a little bit and it still kind of sounds like the original Akuma, but shortened and slightly different kanji. So Aku. This story ended up becoming like just really widespread. The media picked it up, especially back then, but people still remember it. And the dad ended up doing some interviews as well. He became kind of well known for a little bit. Ryan, I think had you heard of this like a while ago already? Like, I
had heard of the story. Never like this many details. Just that someone had tried to name their kid Akuma, and it was not allowed.
Yeah, me too. Like back in university, a friend of mine from Japan in Florida told me about this story. So this is just the story that doesn't go away. People just know about it. Do you remember anything like from around that time? Do you remember anything about it being big in the media, or was that just
1994?
Yeah, I mean that was a while ago, so I don't. That's why.
Well, I remember that. Yeah, like I was.
Yeah.
I was old enough to remember the news, I would say.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know how it ended up finally. But I just remember that this parent tried to give their baby boy name Akuma. And then the media went like crazy about it, like how evil the parents could be, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this story actually gets quite sad, in that. So apparently, and I didn't know this until I began looking into this, and I found an article that went far more in depth into what happened, especially afterwards. But so the dad managed a sunaku, which is like, I mean, it's like a bar basically. I mean, that's the simplest explanation I can come up with. It's like a bar, and you talk to the people that run it, the usually an older lady and maybe a couple younger ladies, and but like a bar kind of place. So he managed this place, and then in 1994, I think it was like the year after it ended up closing. But by 1996, if I remember correctly, it was within a couple of years, he ended up getting a divorce from the mother. And then he also ended up getting arrested for being under suspicion of possessing kakusei, like stimulants. Usually that refers to like meth or something along those lines. And then he ended up going to prison. And the son, Aku, he was apparently put into like an orphanage, like a foster home. And the last information that is known about him from like some magazines around, probably around the late to mid 90s, the kid was in like elementary, junior high. He was doing soccer, the soccer club, and he wanted to become a professional soccer player when he grew up. And then at some point, the dad gets out of prison, but then in 2014, he's caught again for like some robbery-related crime, and then they end up finding, again, they arrest him for like the kakusei, stimulants, and I don't know if he's still in prison or if he's out or if he was totally convicted for that. I'm not sure on that because I wasn't able to find anything after 2014, but yeah, it wasn't a happy story, and it's this thing that unfortunately, I don't know, maybe the kid is still sometimes, that story might come up, and that's a hard thing to deal with, all this stuff that happened in some way, related to him taking the spotlight in the media, so to speak. So, yeah.
Unless he became a pro soccer player and he's just like living it up somewhere.
Well, he could have. Maybe he changed his name. Maybe, and he's.
Maybe,
that would be a wonderful end to the story. That would be wonderful.
Right.
I'm optimistic. I believe in this kid. I don't know what's with you.
Okay, hey, you are a tough spokesperson. So
that's true. I'm the spokesperson for this kid, apparently.
You know what? You convinced me. All right. So Aku, formerly known as Aku, I am rooting for you. So, okay. So. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back with more information on kind of the more modern version of Kirakira Name. Hey, so I got a few announcements and I want to just kind of blaze right through them. First of all, there's been quite an increase in the number of listeners over the past month or two. So thank you so much to all the new people who have found the show recently. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for subscribing and sharing it with your friends or whatever else you're doing to help get the word out. I really, really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. That is the number one free thing that you can do to support this show because subscribing boosts the rankings, especially in Apple Podcasts and probably other places. So subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Next thing, if you haven't checked out Japan Station, go take a listen to that. That's my other podcast. That's my first podcast, which actually the latest episode, which came out on November 1st of 2020, that marks the second anniversary of Japan Station. So we are now in year 3 of Japan Station. You can check out episode 52, which is with Dr. Time and Screech, an expert on the city of Edo, right? Before Tokyo was Tokyo, it was Edo, and there's a whole lot of interesting stuff in our conversation. He has a new book called Tokyo Before Tokyo. Highly recommend it, and you can pick it up at Amazon or wherever else you get your books. But if you're going to be doing your shopping on Amazon, consider using japankyo.com/Amazon because that will send a few pennies to support the show over here. It won't cost you anything extra. So yeah, japankyo.com/Amazon. And of course, check out Kimito Designs. That's where I'm selling my t-shirts and random merch. I'm going to be having a couple beanies, I think, up in the next few days. So go take a look, kimitodesigns.com. That does indirectly fund my little ventures here over at japankyo.com. And if you have any questions that you want Ryan and I to look into, then send an email to ichimon@japankyo.com. You can also send a recording of yourself asking the question. Try to make sure the audio is not too bad because then I can use it in the episode and people can actually understand what you're saying because I would hate for you to just sound, really garbled and I can't make out what you're saying. So just keep that in mind. But I would love, love, love to hear your voices asking us questions, and we will do our best to address the questions. Maybe we can't answer every single one, but we can certainly discuss them at least. So again, ichimon@japankyo.com. Attach your audio file or just type it up and we'll take a look at it. All right. So let's get back to the episode. There is quite a lot more to go over. And by the way, if you're a patron at even the $1 a month level, there is going to be a couple bonus clips at the end of the episode after the outro music. All right. So let's get back into it. Now we have a story about something pretty recent. When was the story of the next one of Oji-sama in 2019, I think, right?
I think it was last year, 2019.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So Oji-sama is a very well-known example of what you could call a kirakira name. Although, interestingly, Oji-sama is written the way you would normally read it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it has Oji-sama doesn't have some crazy reading like we were talking about before. Oji-sama means prince, and that's how you would write it normally. You would see it in a book written as Oji-sama, but this person's mother decided to name him Oji-sama, which again means prince. And I think in English, Ryan, have you ever heard of somebody named Prince aside from the artist formerly known as Prince?
I mean, that's a very famous example that is Prince.
But I think that's his actually artist name, right? That wasn't, I suspect that's not his actual name, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
I'm not either. I'm going to check right now. But aside from that, it doesn't feel like it would be weird to encounter that, but I don't believe I ever have in my life.
Yeah, I can't remember meeting. Oh, was it one of Michael Jackson's kids named Prince?
One was Blanket, so maybe.
Yes, one was Blanket. Yes, I forgot about Blanket. Oh my God, yeah. But I thought one was Prince. I'm pretty sure one was Prince.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
But I mean, celebrities in the West almost exclusively use kirakira names. Yeah,
there's plenty of American, or not just American, but first of all, I mean, American ones come to mind. They have very creative names. And so my point was, though, that I think, to me, naming a child these days Prince does not sound to me as peculiar as naming your child Oji-sama in Japanese. But that's just my impression. So So this guy was 18 years old in 2019. So I guess he was born in like 2001. So in 2001, the story goes that his mother decided to name him Oji-sama because she was like her prince to her. She was like a prince, right? But according to Oji-sama, and said this in an interview, she just went to turn in the birth registration without the dad even knowing. She just wanted to do this, and I guess she suspected that maybe the dad was going to say no. So she just did it. And by the time the dad came home, I guess it's like, well, too late. Now he's prince. So Oji-sama, which is, I mean, good intentions, but, it seems a little one-sided there, or totally one-sided.
Real quick, I did just check. Prince, the musician, was in fact really named Prince.
Awesome. Hey, all right.
Wow.
So, okay, so we have two examples of actual people named Prince in English, and I can only think of one person named Oji-sama in Japanese.
Yeah.
His full name is Prince Rogers Nelson.
Oh, hey, all right.
Wow,
So
okay.
I guess the parents wanted to go with something very creative for the first name, since the latter two are not all that, unique. So that's cool. That's cool. So anyway, the thing with Oji-sama, though, is that he had a very hard time growing up, it seems. And, from a young age, it seems he wanted to change his name. And you can imagine, that having a name like that, or some of the other names that we talked about, would make you easily made fun of, right? You can imagine other children at school making fun of you, or Oji-sama, formerly the person formerly known as Oji-sama, because he did change his name.
Nobody stays Prince forever.
Nobody stays Prince forever. He also is the person formerly known as Oji-sama. So he describes how, for example, when he would go to karaoke and they would ask him, like, do you want to make a membership card? And he would say, my name is Oji-sama. And they would say, what? He's like, is that your real name? He's like, yes, that's my real name. And, other examples, for example, he was in Yamanashi, and Yamanashi is, pretty definitely more on the rural side of things. So I guess he lived in a kind of smaller, more rural area. And some people in that area where he lived, like, they just knew him. They had seen pictures of him because he was the guy named Oji-sama, and they would recognize him at the mall and say, oh, you're Oji-sama, even though he didn't know who they were. So
that would be a little weird.
Yeah, that's just
that
so creepy, right? Especially if you're not like a YouTuber or anything like that, and you're not like making yourself public, and all of a sudden you get like people saying like, you're that guy. That's tough. That's tough. And so in, what was it? When he was like around 15 years old, I think he was in junior high, he was reading a manga, a very well-known manga in Japan, but outside of Japan, I think it's not so well known. It's got a very long name, but it's shortened to Kochikame, right?
Yes.
So anyway, you can look that up. I'm not gonna. It's a super long name. It's funny. They often shorten those really long names to like short ones. But he was reading that, and he saw that a character changed their name, and so he found out that if you were 15 years old or older in Japan, you could file to get your name changed. And so he did this when he was like 18, I think right before he was going to start university. Yeah, it was like February. So that's a couple of months before you start university in April. And he submitted some paperwork explaining how, this was, tough, and he wanted to improve his life, make his life better. And so he wanted this new name, and the new name that he ended up getting was Hajime. And Hajime, although the kanji is different from the typical, like when you write it as Hajimeru, like basically the meaning is like to begin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he had consulted with friends and a priest and all that stuff, and they thought, that would be a good name because he's beginning kind of his life again with this new name. So he picked this name, Hajime, and it no problem. He got it 1 month later. He was able to register it in his family registry, the Koseki, and then he tweeted about it, and he blew up. The story blew up, and he got like 100,000 retweets, 200,000 likes, and this story was everywhere. I remember hearing about this when it came out, and he was interviewed and all this stuff. So I found a written, like a text interview from NHK that he did. And so, yeah, this was a very, very well-known case, but it shows how, some of the difficulties that people that have these very, very unusual names can have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys want to chime in on any inconveniences you think that might come across if you have this sort of name in Japan?
Nah, you'd be fine.
Okay. Okay. All right. So Ryan is very positive today.
Because he's tough spokesperson.
Yes, I'm the spokesperson for the kirakira names.
Yes. So, Miyuki, any other difficulties? Can you think of any other difficulties that somebody with a very unusual name might have?
Well, the first thing that comes up is like you always have to explain.
Yeah.
If you have like strange, for example, like we just talked earlier, if you have like strange kanjis for their names, they have to explain how to write in kanjis, right?
Yeah.
And just like you said, like people easily make fun of them by their like unique names.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like they could be bullied for that. I mean, little kids do such stupid things.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think like I just did the low voice 50-year-old poo guy thing, but when they try to get a job or start working as a grown-up business persons, then that would be like much more difficult.
Yeah,
because like they I mean like those I don't know how to say, maybe weird is not the right word, but those unique, very original names, sometimes it's difficult to take them seriously. Yeah. I mean, 50-year-old poo guy, I mean, if he was a like CEO of a big company, but then is his name a poo? Like, really? Is that company
it's
okay?
Tough. It's tough. And the thing about like Japan especially is, for example, resumes generally, I mean, sometimes there's exceptions. In some companies I've seen, there was like one foreign company that was getting rid of this practice, but you have pictures on the resume, right? You actually have a photo that you submit with your resume, which, I mean, to me comes off as like it's very easy to make a judgment, based on appearance. So if that's the case, and you also have like, a name that is very uncommon, it's just very easy to make these snap judgments when in reality, like all you need to know is like, what has this person achieved? What are their work experiences? What maybe their academic experience, relevant experiences, whether the name or the picture is there doesn't really matter ultimately, because you're trying to find ideally a person that's going to do a good job. But sadly, people do make judgments based on your name or the way you look. And that does happen a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was thinking. It's a complicated issue because I do agree with everything Miyuki said that those would be problems you would have. Mm-hmm. But part of me wants to say then like, that's the fault of society that needs to change to not discriminate on names and not the person who has the name.
Agree. Yes.
Yeah. I'm 100%
and so it's a very tricky thing, right? Because, I mean, if you think about it, like every single name was new at some point, right?
Yeah,
it's true. Yeah.
In a way, in a very, very, very broad way, every single name was a kirakira name once, right?
It's true, yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that's different is that, whether it's Ryan or Miyuki or Tony or whatever.
Hey, I'm tough spokesperson.
Enough people started using that or there was enough of a reason for people to use that it became common. And now like those are like, not quote unquote weird or strange. So, it's tricky, because if you never introduce any new names, then, that's kind of boring. And I'm totally fine with, having a creative name. But the sad reality is also that, like you said, the problem is there in society that, you are creating a situation where your child has to be like the person that changes society.
Yeah, it is a burden to put on them. Another thing that I think might be a factor that a lot of the excuses people are putting up maybe don't hold up as much as they think is they're imagining like if your name was Pooh and you were like a 50-year-old today.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be. The Pooh child would be a 50-year-old in 50 years when possibly more kirakira names have come about and it's not seen as strange as it is now.
Definitely possible. Yeah. I think that, some of these names are probably going to become more common, whereas some will not. Some will just end up, in the very rare exception. But
the ones that have meaning like Akuma and Oji-sama, those ones are probably always going to be a little tricky. But the stuff like Tiara and Hiro, I think those are going to become more and more common moving forward. And that in a generation or two, people probably won't think it's that strange.
It's definitely possible, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's just, that's the general trend. Yeah. And, sometimes there's, little by little, it kind of goes that way. It kind of comes back and forth. And that's just how it is. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And so you do get cases like Oji-sama where they just want to change their names, right? It's been too much trouble. And, it seems like he wasn't like holding a grudge towards his parents, especially his mom. But, he's very honest in that he says, it's very tough, like when you say this name, because people think like instantly like, oh, your mom, your parents were stupid for naming you that. Right. And he's very like blunt about it. But it also seems that he was like, the article mentioned how he talked to his parents and they were mostly, the mom seemed to be okay with it, even though she was a little bit sad. But, he seems like a very strong, very good individual that was able to, handle this very maturely. Other people, it's even more difficult. So you can understand how they might change their name. But
I am curious if privately at home, the mother still calls him Oji-sama.
I suspect yes.
I do too. And I wonder if he like holds up his like ID card like, no, I'm Hajime now.
No, you know what?
And then she's like, you'll always be my prince.
And then I suspect like he might say, okay, but only in the house.
Right.
So that got me curious about how you might change your name in Japan. And it turned out to be like, in terms of the procedure, like not as complicated as I thought it might be. Basically, like you fill out a form and you provide a little bit of documentation that, explains why. And there's certain, acceptable excuses that are usually like, they'll say yes fairly easily. And then you pay, I think it can vary like 1,500 yen, 30 or 3,000 yen. So like 15 to 30 US dollars roughly. And if it all goes well within a month, then you're good. Yeah, they'll change your name in the koseki and you're good. One recommendation that I was reading is that you should, if possible, it's easier to do this before you're like in your 20s because you have less like convoluted paperwork that you have to change and there's less records of you using the old name. Because if you have a lot of records like loans and credit cards using your old name, then you have to use an alias for a while and then you have to provide records of people calling you by that alias. So
makes sense.
Yeah. One interesting thing that I saw in the list of like acceptable excuses was that like the most interesting one that I saw was if your name is easily mistaken for that of a foreign person. So,
Tiara?
Tiara, I guess.
Tiara
or,
and Caesar.
Like, Caesar, yeah. Like or Georgie. Could Georgie go by that excuse? I mean,
Lisa?
Right? Lisa, yeah, that could go by that excuse.
Yeah.
People think I'm foreign, but I'm Japanese. It pisses me off.
I don't want to be mistaken. I'm a Japanese.
Yeah.
I will change my name to Hanako.
Yeah.
No one would think I am a foreigner if my name was Hanako. Kind of.
Yeah. And then like other ones were like if it's really hard to read your kanji or, just more like the stuff you might expect, like very impractical things. So yeah, apparently it's relatively easy. Now, whether they make the person that has to judge this, whether they make the judgment of, it's okay for you to change your name or not, that's a whole other matter. I guess if your excuse is good enough, then they'll say yes. But if it's not, then they might say no. So I said towards the beginning of the podcast, I think that this, in my opinion, I don't think this phenomenon of kirakira name, or really like the phenomenon of wanting to name your child something very creative or interesting or something that has a very good meaning, let's say, is anything new. I think as long as people had the freedom to name their children what they wanted, then people were doing this. And I think one piece of evidence of this is a very, very famous story that usually you hear in rakugo, this form of Japanese storytelling, and it's called juげむ. And juげむ, the original text of juげむdates back to like 1703 is what I was able to see. Mm-hmm. And basically the story is super, super simply a family, and I think usually it's explained as a family that's been wanting to have a child for a very long time, but maybe they were having trouble, and then finally they get a son. They want to name their child, their son, something very, very auspicious, something very nice. And so they go to a Buddhist priest, and they ask the Buddhist priest, help us with this name. Can you give us some suggestions? And then the Buddhist priest gives them a whole bunch of suggestions, and they can't decide, so they end up giving it the child all these names, right? Just a long, long list of names. And so the name is very, has a very good meaning, but it's just so long that it's very impractical. So can I give it a shot and see if I can say the whole thing here?
Go
Give
for
it a shot.
All right, let's see. All right. じゅげむじゅげむ五行のすり傷、海砂利行の水行松、雲来松、風来松、寝るところ、寝るところ、リスむところ、やぶら工事、のふら工事、パイポのシューリンガンのグーリンダイのポンポコピーのポンポコナーの長久名の長介。So I think I got it mostly right. It wasn't that smooth. I'm definitely not a rakugo performer, but yeah,
it was good.
I got the parts there. So yeah. So basically, like most of the meanings there like have to do with like long life, right? Like they want their child to have a long life, right?
Or like healthy, or like good fortune, or have enough food. I mean, he doesn't get starved. Yeah.
To have stuff to eat and have a place to live and have a place to sleep. Yeah.
So well, the parents wished all the good luck.
Yeah. So okay, so the story, what happens is in the modern, the more recent version of the story is, so juげむfor short, he grows up, or well, he's a child, and so he's the story. The rakugo performer will say this name like again and again and again, and that's kind of the joke, right? That he has to, every time they have to call the child by his name, it's this like big long thing. And so the child goes to school, and the child gets in a fight. juげむgets in a fight or something. They're playing with another child, and then the child goes and tells on juげむto the parents, and so he says, "Oh, juげむ, blah 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 blah, hit me, and now I have a bump on my head." And then the parents like, "What? Juげむdid blah 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 blah," and then they go back and forth, and then at the end of the story is like, "Oh, but the name was so long that now the bump on your head has healed." Right, so no problem. We're all good. So just a joke. And then I found that an older version involved juげむplaying in a river or by a river with some children, and then juげむfalls in the river. So then the children go to the parents and say, juげむgokko no surikire, blah 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 blah. He fell in the river. You have to go save him. And then the dad's like, what? Juげむgokko no surikire, blah 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 blah. He fell in the river. Oh no! And then it tells the oji-chan, the grandpa, and then it's like juげむwhat? And then they go back and forth, and then by the time they get to the river, juげむhas drowned.
That's a sad, scary story.
Yeah.
I like how you ended with laughing of this funny story where a child drowns in a river.
What do you think? Like, do you think that was meant? I mean, I think it is meant to poke fun at the idea, but do you think people back in like the 1700s were laughing at that? Like, what, Miyuki or Ryan?
I mean, I don't have any experience living in 1700s Japan, but it sounds comedic.
I suspect yes.
Maybe.
Yeah. But you know what? Like, I think the only reason this story was funny back then, or it still is funny now, is that parents sometimes do get carried away. And I'm sure that parents, get super creative and carried away even back then. So, the whole story begins with this. Usually the performer will say, parents, when they have a child, any parent wants to name their child, something, very auspicious, something with a good meaning. And, sometimes they get carried away. So if that wasn't a thing that happened back in 1703, maybe with the samurai or something, then I don't think that story would be very funny or all that interesting. Like, what, Miyuki, do you agree? Do you think that's the case?
Maybe. I mean, I'm trying to imagine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, this is like a total exaggeration. Nobody would ever have this name.
Yeah.
But, maybe there's still, even back then, especially among the like people with the money and, the samurai, maybe even like merchants, there might have been people that wanted to have these very flashy names. And so I can imagine how, this story would kind of poke fun at that, make it a joke.
I guess.
Yeah, to me, otherwise, like, I don't see it being so funny if there wasn't some element of truth to it. Right. But this is like a classic rakugo story. This is like something that I think most Japanese people know this story. This is something like children know. They love to say this. Like, sometimes they compete with each other. Oh, can you say jugeme? And then,
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if kids know it, that makes me think that it was probably funny for them even without thinking of kirakira names, because kids don't have the context of what is a normal name, what is a strange name yet. Yeah, I mean, it's funny just because it's so ridiculous, too. There's definitely that aspect to it. Yeah, especially because, like, the performer will say this, like, 10, 12 times in the story, maybe. They say it again and again. And, You're
it's
like
just
halfway
funny.
there,
like,
you could be a teller.
I mean, it's just funny. Like, by the time you go like, oh no, here he goes again. Oh no, here she goes again. Whatever, because they say it again and again. So it's a very fun story. Yeah. So maybe this has been going on. Some form of kirakira name has been going on for a very long time in Japan. But one interesting aspect to this kirakira name that I think Miyuki kind of highlighted. She stumbled across this, and I thought it was just cool to mention. But there are of course, there's many other countries that deal with similar issues, like the case of Akuma, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the one that you found?
So it just happened recently, right?
Yeah, it happened in the summer of 2020. Yeah.
So this year.
Yeah.
2020. So there is. Sorry, I forgot. Was it like American couple?
It was UK.
UK. Okay, sorry. So there is a couple in UK, and they wanted to name their son very unique and has good meaning, right? And it somehow relates to an angel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. So they decided to give their son a name, Lucifer.
Lucifer, yes.
Wow, very...
very unexpected, Yeah.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, I mean...
so to speak.
It's like one step up from Akuma.
Yeah, it's basically, that's why
it's just a normal demon.
Yeah, kind of like Akuma, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So they wanted to name their kid Lucifer, and what happened?
I believe initially the government people, whoever you register your name with, said no.
Yeah.
But then they couldn't find any real reason to forbid it. So they did win and were able to name their child Lucifer.
Right. Yeah.
And their official position was that the government can advise you on potential problems with names, but not actually prevent you from naming something you want. Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting that article highlights other countries and, similar situations where, for example, New Zealand has prohibited certain names. I think for real, like the number 4 and real. So Australia seemed to be a little bit more on the strict side, prohibiting certain names. And then I found another article where it said in 2017, in Germany, another couple tried to name their kid Lucifer, but that one ended up going to court and they got rejected. So they ended up naming their child Lucian, like Lucian. I don't know how that you would pronounce it in German, but it's a slight variation. Again, kind of like Akuma. It's like, okay, fine, I can't name my kid Akuma, I'll name it Aku. And so they just did a slight variation. And then one interesting thing that I saw in that article was that Iceland is apparently pretty strict with names, and you only have like a set list of names that you can name your child, and anything outside of that list of names for boys and girls, you have to like submit a request and they have to approve it, and it has to fit within the Icelandic alphabet and be grammatically compatible in terms of its endings with the language, which in a way reminds me a little bit of Japanese, because of course you can only stick to the phonetic system of Japanese, and although the grammar isn't such an issue, but you do have to, you can't just name your child something without sounds that don't exist there. You have to stick to the sound system of Japanese. But unlike Japanese, where you can be very, very creative, in Iceland, you kind of have to stick to this list of, I think it was like 1,000 something names or something. So very interesting. I had no idea about that.
I think as far as I remember, in Iceland, people don't have a family name.
Oh, I don't remember. I have no idea.
I think so okay, my name is Miyuki, I'm a female. And I say, and if my mother's name was Hanako, my not technically last name, but the name comes after my first name would be
the family
Hanako's daughter in Icelandic language.
Like kind of like Hanako's son, like Anderson, like Robertson, that kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they don't have a family name that people share.
Right.
My name is Miyuki, the daughter of Hanako.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I've heard like Vikings or something like that. Like sometimes, like in movies, you hear that kind of like, they'll introduce themselves that.
I think Iceland still has that system. I mean, the population is really small.
Potentially there could be Miyuki, daughter of Miyuki.
Miyuki, daughter of Miyuki. Could be,
yeah.
Or tough spokesperson, son of tough spokesperson.
Oh, yeah. That name's awesome. We can't change it.
Wow.
Okay.
Tough, daughter of spokesperson. Probably should say son.
All right. So, last big area here that I wanted to touch on briefly, but as we've said before, and I'm pretty sure we said this in the previous episode, there's name trends. Certain names become more popular, certain names, fall out of favor, and maybe kirakira name have been a bit more popular, in the past few years. These kind of very creative names have been popular, but it seems like also within the past maybe 2 years or so, I've heard the term shiwa name. So shiwa means like wrinkles. So wrinkly names, I guess you could translate it.
No, wrinkle name. Let's go with it twice.
Okay, wrinkle name.
Wrinkle name.
So wrinkle name is basically like a very old-fashioned sounding name. So it might be like a name that was popular, like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
Maybe.
200 years ago.
I don't know about 200 years ago. I haven't seen any of those, but maybe that's Shiwa name.
Tough spokesperson has a long history.
Tough spokesperson, yes, has a very long history. So it's this kind of, I guess you could say, backlash where, there are some parents that want, these super trendy new names. There are some parents that actually want to embrace older, more, classical Japanese-ish sounding names. So, for example, you might have boy names that end in ske, right? For example, what would be a good one? Like, Miyuki, what can you think of a boy's name that ends in
Taisuke?
Taisuke, yeah. Sosuke, yeah.
Kosuke?
Right. Or like names that end in O for boys, like what? Like Masuo or
Masao.
yeah, Masao. Yeah.
Tatsuo.
Right.
Kazuo.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So yeah, usually these are slightly older people, maybe people in their 40s, 50s, 60s. You might see these kinds of names. For women, you might see names that end in ko, like we discussed in the last episode. Sachiko or I don't know. Masako. Yeah.
Yoshiko.
Yoshiko. Yeah. Or you might also see names that end in mi, right? So what would be one of those?
I don't know. Hidemi? Hiromi?
Yeah, those are slightly older sounding. Masami, yeah.
Yoshimi?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of.
So apparently these are climbing in the rankings in name popularity. So who knows? I mean, I'm sure some of these more creative names will stick around, like we discussed, but some of these older names will also become just normal again. They won't sound old, particularly within the next 10 or 20 years, probably.
It just repeats.
Yep, it just goes back and forth.
Yeah.
And some new ones and some old ones, and then some disappear and then some come back. And that's just how it is. I mean, it's the same in the US, I think. So same pretty much everywhere, as long as there is the freedom to name your child almost whatever you want, except for...
Not
Lucifer.
in Iceland.
Yeah, not in Iceland.
Except in Iceland.
Except in Iceland, yeah.
But I think another reason could be because of the trend of those kirakira names. If I was a parent and if I give my son old-fashioned Masao name, then it might stand out.
That's
because
true.
all other boys are like Ritsu, Riku,
very true,
Hayate, all those kind of
If you want your son to stand out, I recommend tough spokesperson.
well, yeah. If I gave birth in English speaking country, I would. But if I
no, in Japanese it works fine.
Oh my
too.
gosh.
Okay,
That would be a different story, but okay.
It becomes better in Japanese.
Let me think about it. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I agree. Like when you actually go against the trend, then that name also stands out. And now against the trend is very traditional, older sounding name. So then that starts to become, kind of new again.
I mean, that's what I mean. And another thing is because some issues related to kirakira names became so popular and well known, and parents decided to, started avoiding.
True,
such names.
They hear about the problems. Yeah.
So it's a safer to
Definitely.
give their names not too original, unique. Individual names.
Everybody's Taro and Hanako now.
Like in Iceland.
Like in Iceland, yeah.
I like
Taro,
Iceland.
son of Taro. Hanako, daughter of Hanako.
Here's your list, ma'am. Do you want to be Hanako or I don't know,
Masako?
Taro? You Masako or Hanako? Yeah, you have two choices.
And then a rebel went for Taroko.
Taroko. And they spent a year in the courts trying to figure
And
out. And
Hanakosuke.
Hanakosuke. That's kind of cute.
That one actually doesn't sound bad.
So that is
Hanakoskaro.
Hanakostaro?
Hanakoskaro.
Koskaro?
Yeah, I don't know why I went with that. Hanakostaro probably makes more sense, but it is what it is, and now it's Hanakoskaro.
Okay.
All right. So that is Kirakira name and some other related stuff. Do we have any last thoughts here, Ryan, or tough spokesperson?
Honestly, I don't know if this will influence anyone listening, but I'm more in favor of the having freedom to name people whatever you want. So yeah, give your kids cool names. Don't worry about this stuff.
Yeah.
I honestly think Akuma and Lucifer should also be accepted.
Yeah. I mean, for the record, I am totally on your side of the fence in that people should be allowed to do it, and we should be able to get creative. But unfortunately, it's that battle with society, right? That is the sad part.
I know lots of people who just use nicknames. So if the kid doesn't want to go by their name, they can just make up a nickname.
No, that's true too. Yeah, and I'm sure many people end up doing that too.
Though I will say, please don't intentionally try to give your kid a horrible name. Give them something that you actually think is good, even if it's weird.
Yeah, I have no way of knowing what, for example, Akuma, the parent of the person formerly known as Akuma, was thinking when they decided on that name. But to me, it comes off as kind of sad that when in that situation you go like, fine, I can't name my kid Akuma, then I'll just name him something that vaguely sounds like it. To me, it sounds like you didn't really care that much about the name. You just are trying to like kind of come up with an excuse to just not think about it. And again, I don't know what he was thinking. I have no idea. But to me, if I was put in that situation, I go like, okay, you know what? Fine. Maybe I can't do this. I did everything I could. I'm going to try to find a different name that I really, really care about, that I think will be a name that I will be happy with and that my child will be happy with for the rest of their lives. So that's the approach that I would take. And, everybody's going to take a different approach maybe, but that's just how I would go. Miyuki, any final thoughts?
I mean, I don't know if this is what you hear in America or, some English-speaking countries. But in Japan, people sometimes say that name is the first gift that parents can give to their child.
Right.
So, just like you two said, whatever the name would be, as long as parents really think about their kids, that would be, others have no right to say anything about it.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. At the same time, if parents really care and care enough to imagine the future of the daughter or the son, 50-year-old poo guy. I keep coming back to that, but it's totally fine. It's totally fine. But I'm just saying, I personally wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And that's, that's my thing. So, it's okay to have my, own thoughts.
Yeah.
But it's...
No, but I agree. And I think, if I were to meet 50-year-old Pooh, my approach would be, oh, man, really? That's so interesting. Can you tell me about that? I would be I would be curious, and I would be genuinely interested, and I not like, oh, my God, your name is Pooh, ha, 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 right?
My reaction would only be positive.
Yeah. I kind of do that with a lot of people, especially Japanese people. Like I said in the last episode, I love asking people about their names and learning about the kanji. That's something that I often do with my friends. That I very early on in relationships with Japanese people, I often do that. That's just what I do. I don't know. I like to learn about that.
Before hajimemashite, you just walk up to a stranger and be like, hey, what's your kanji?
What's your kanji? Tell me about your kanji. Yeah.
By the way, nice to meet you.
It goes the other way around.
Yeah. But yes, Miyuki, yes. There are people that do not take that approach. And you do have to think about that.
I know. That's what I mean. Not everybody is as nice as you two. And, not everybody is.
We're so nice. We're so nice.
People sometimes make really stupid and mean approaches to people. Just like the resume thing and the photograph and names and all that stuff. And maybe it's the case, more severe in Japan. I don't know, but...
Some of the band names on that list from the UK article look like the parents were trying to be mean to their children.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, exactly.
For Real's one of the nicer ones.
Yeah. There were a few. I will include links to those articles too if people want to read more about Iceland and those other names that were banned.
Iceland.
But exactly. That's my point. It's some names just come off as the parents didn't really think about it and didn't really give it the thought. But if a parent
if you think about it, if you put an effort, then I think any name should be okay.
Yeah. If they say, well, actually, somebody, there was this person that was named For Real that, I was climbing a mountain one time and I ended up, getting stranded because of a blizzard, but for real, he came about and he saved my life. And if for real hadn't been there that day, I would be dead. And, at home, my wife was pregnant and I wouldn't have been able to see my son born the next week. So when I went home and I told my wife, for real saved my life, she said, let's name my son for real. And it's the best decision I've ever made. I'd be like, yeah, it's a good decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good story. It is a good story. Perfect.
But, to me, that comes off like, oh, wow, like they really cared about that name and they understood that maybe that name is not common, but, that name has such a connection to them and they think that it's worth remembering that episode and it's worth giving that name to their child, right? Like I could go like, okay, yeah. Awesome.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
For real it is.
Yeah. But I can't help but suspect that whoever chose for real for their child and got it rejected didn't have quite an interesting, heartfelt story as that.
I feel it was like their online gamer name. They're like, this name's cool.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. So.
Which is still better than some of the other names. But.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. So we'll be back next time with another totally different topics. I think we'll move away
next
from
time,
names.
Kira names.
Kira names.
No more names for a while. We've done 2 hours on names, I think, so we're good on names.
We've done enough.
Yeah. We'll come back with something totally different. All right. Thank you, tough spokesperson.
You're welcome. Anytime.
All right. Thank you, not tough spokesperson.
Right. I am not tough, unfortunately. Yeah. I should be.
Okay. See you next time.
See you, everyone.
Bye.